storefront window at the Dirt Palace. All of this is happening October 2018 through July of this year. This is the 5th Artist Talk event that we are hosting. As part of this project, the Dirt Palace has commissioned 6 artists to make new work in conversation with the river, its history, and the future plans for the neighborhood greenway for a circle window gallery. We're happy to present Gradient Forest, Xylem and Phloem, an installation by Moon Bain. Tonight he is going to discuss his work with local artist and curator Anabel Vázquez Rodríguez. Thank you very much. Woohoo! Gracias, Kiki.
Go, Andrew, Moon Bain! Woohoo!
Bienvenidos.
I did that. Hi, here's Johnny, and I did that. Oh, this sound. I'm not apologizing because I did that. Damn it. Oh, I love how everybody here. That's easy. Love you, man.
All right, welcome. Bienvenidos. Thank you for being here on this beautiful day where we all want to be outside. Pero mi nombre es Anabel Vázquez Rodríguez, and I am thrilled to be here to talk about Andrew Moon Bain. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to say a little bit about Andrew's work. How many here are familiar with Andrew's work? Everyone? Yeah. Cool. Well, then I'll make it briefer. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our current window exhibiting artist, Andrew Moon Bain. He's a visual artist, record producer, songwriter, performing musician, and part-time graphic designer. He was active in the arts growing up in Seattle and played as a cellist at the Seattle Symphony Orchestra, and then relocated to Providence to earn his BFA in sculpture from RISD. And I think that's something that's super interesting that we're talking about is Andrew's development as a musician and a visual artist has always been parallel and intertwined from a very young age. So after being here in Providence and very much active of the thriving arts community here, this is like late 90s, he relocated to Brooklyn, New York, where he spent 14 years working and raising his daughter, who's now here at RISD, studying animation. He has traveled extensively in the United States, Europe, Jamaica, and has also had a lot of influences with these travels, including the Caribbean, in his art and music. He's co-founder of the Luster Kings Production, a US-based reggae record label. By the way, the music you were listening to when you were kind of getting together was part of Andrew's production. And he's written and produced records for compelling artists such as Black Jean, SZA, Snoop Dogg, and Major Lazer, and many others. Let's see. He recently completed work on the Yadan
Jadam Blackamoor, yeah.
Yadan Blackamoor, third full-length studio album, Order of Extinction, set to release in the winter of 2020. And right now he's working with French New Caledonian singer Marcus Gad. As a visual artist, Bain is currently working at Zia Mays printing studio in Florence, Massachusetts, making screen prints. He's continuing to be active, making prints, installation, paintings, and showing in the region. He's an avid gardener and naturalist. And we're so thrilled to have the installation. I hope you got a chance to see it either while you were coming in or even just a slideshow that we were playing about it. And now what we're going to do today is going to show a little bit of Andrew's previous work, just to give context on what you're seeing in the window and like how all of his work. Musically, we started showing his music, and we'll listen to it a little bit after the talk, because we're kind of saying goodbye and hanging out. And it's in no particular order. And we're going to just show some of his work. Andrew's going to tell us a little bit about the pieces and how they and then we'll also kind of flow into the piece, which is the garden behind us.
Hi.
Hola.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, so I'm thrilled to be here, and glad Pippi asked me to be a part of the installation. I actually always had a dream of showing in the Dirt Palace window, so I was pretty excited when she asked me to do it. I'm gonna let the technical.
Okay, I found.
Okay. So this piece is a painting on a panel mixed with some elements of screen printed paper and collage. And this is actually, I think this was for a solo show I did at AS220, maybe around 2007, 2008. It's called Great Owl Hollow Peace Council. And I made this in an apartment in New York, and this was much later actually, closer to 2011, because I remember wrestling with this piece, because it was maybe 3 feet by 3 feet is a, pretty big panel, and I remember getting really feeling like, man, I love this painting. Physically, it was super challenging because I had just this really small space, and I literally was wrestling with it on the floor, and it was kind of a poignant time where things were getting hard to create work and sell work and continue to show, and for me personally, but I think all over the country people were having a hard time. But I remember feeling really proud of it when I finished it, but also being like, man, I hated making this because it was so draining and difficult and confined. And so it was kind of one of those moments where when music started calling to me, it made more sense.
And that's something that we've been talking about as we were getting ready for the talk, is the balancing that Andrew's been doing between music and visual art, and how sometimes that could be happening at the same time, or one takes over and the other doesn't. And this piece you were mentioning is one of your most recent two-dimensional pieces.
Yeah, this is another kind of mixed media collage on panel, painting, screen printed elements, and collage. Most of the collage stuff is paper that I screen printed patterns on. This actually was in a show at Sky Gallery up the street on Broadway. Not too long ago. I believe that the gallery owner is in the building. I've heard her presence.
Johnny and I own Sky Gallery, and I'm so happy to love Moon, because I love him for life, regardless of his art. He's a beautiful human being. And I'm here, with all you people right now. We're all here together, and it's okay.
We come in force. When we come. Okay.
I'm just saying we're all here. We love each other. And it's a beautiful thing. And that work is a beautiful work.
This one is called Hunting Grounds, and this one was for, actually, I had started working on the piece, and I had got into a new studio space out in Mass. I moved about 2.5 years ago, and found this great old warehouse. I was like, oh, this reminds me of home, Providence, and it took me like about a year to start making visual stuff fluid in the space. I don't know what it was. It was just I was really busy with a lot of music projects and then graphic design stuff, and it's a totally it flows hand in hand, but it takes, for me, it's kind of like I have to have the room clean before I start focusing on something. I don't know. But this, I was psyched about it. It was kind of like a slow process. I go in and work on it for a few hours, and then a friend wanted an album cover for a project he was working on. There was a really cool musical project that was like a kind of like, I don't know, like Timberland type beats meets Ozzy Osbourne or something. It was like a really trippy music group out of Boston called Birds That Eat Birds with a killer bass player, producer friend of mine. And I was like, oh, this will fit perfect for what he's doing. And I ended up developing the image and then shooting some of it, so some of that became their album cover as well. And then ended up finishing the piece and showing it for a China show.
We'll be seeing some of Andrew's graphic design work with album covers, and this is a good example of something that did a crossover, no?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's it. This is a screen print called Where Were the Great Eagles of Monwa, 2005 in NOLA. And it was thinking kind of like this, a bit of social commentary on these, you know, it was off of Lord of the Rings, which, you know, the Great Eagles of Monwa are these fantastical beasts that sweep in and save our heroines and all the people that need to be saved in the most dire strait at the nick of time. And it was, I guess, it must have been shortly after that, one of those one of those movies came out, because I was thinking about it and just thinking like, where was this savior for all of these poor souls in New Orleans?
It definitely, for me, resonated. Being from Puerto Rico, of course the houses are very much American, but right, that as a diaspora, people who are watching from the outside, seeing this imagery, it's definitely resonating.
Yeah, it's like if it had been another neighborhood or it had been another community, there would have been much greater aid.
Oh yeah.
In a heartbeat. And
probably not all the deaths, you know.
Yeah. I like this little cat and dog though. These guys. I think the dog saved the cat in that one, guys.
The cat saved the dog. What are you talking about?
Another silk screen. Yes, this is just straight screen printed, nothing collaged, all screen.
And in terms of silk screening, even though you were working with all these things before coming to Providence, Providence was a big influence in your screen printing work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, this is a show poster for my soul rock band, Boo City. This is actually the first show we ever played. Screen printing, I actually started when I was super young in high school, like maybe 14, 15. And it was a project a friend of mine and I worked on, and we used to, we figured it out, we were into it, I can't remember, I took a class freshman year of high school and got really interested in it, and then a buddy of mine and we built a little studio in the bike shed of my parents' house, and I remember we used to burn screens with a photo floodlight, and we put it through a pie tin, and it would be like 15-minute exposure, which now I'm actually to do something. We put together a screen I'm gonna burn after this talk, and it's gonna take 55 seconds.
So having that knowledge as a young person, but then coming and seeing what was being done with silk
Yeah.
here. How did that kind of influence what you already knew?
Well, I was doing that there. We were making like T-shirts of some of the art, drawings, illustrations I was doing. That was totally inspired by skateboarding and punk rock music and all the stuff that was happening in Seattle artistically. But then I came to RISD, and I remember I wanted to make a screen print of this kind of Rauschenberg-inspired musical feeling. Like, I don't know, I thought it was cool to like translate music visually. It was like something, it was called the blues, because I was really listening to a lot of like Robert Johnson and John Lee Hooker and all these great blues musicians. So I kind of did this collage of blues artists, like Etta James, and all these people were in this collage, and I printed at the RISD printmaking studio, but it was like one color. And then I remember I ran into, it was one of the fellows from the old Fort Thunder, and I wanted to keep going, but it was at the end of the year, so I stopped doing it. They had a place to burn screens, so then I started going there to burn screens, and I had another studio where I print at, but they had the facility, so then totally got wrapped up into the whole community of screen printers here, and
So it was like the
It was like a
access,
natural-
but also like an extension of the community through school.
yeah.
And then here, we have this poster that you made for your music, and you mentioned a little bit like the transition, or when you were back in Seattle, right? Starting with classical, then kind of a mix of hip
Hip
hop.
hop, yeah. I used to
Um,
rap. Catch me rapping out of Franklin High School assembly. Yeah, made beats and all of that.
And this is a paint.
This is a collage that's drawn into some painting and drawing and screen printed stuff. So I'm not sure exactly, but it looks like I printed this cat. I probably drew these people.
Angelic breath.
But yeah, and that was a series that I did for a friend's shop downtown, Queen of Hearts, this woman, Karen Beatty, who had opened a kind of a clothing. She made a lot of her own clothes, and she was selling it. And I actually ended up printing a lot of her fabric that she then sewed into clothes, and she'd do these fashion shows and stuff downtown. And this was a part of the same series. I did maybe 6 or 7. There's small little collages that were painted into as well.
Do you find in these kind of like two-dimensional works, because we saw the most recent one, you were still combining all of these elements. So screening, painting, drawing, all of them.
Yeah.
And collaging. Right?
Yes, that's kind of my thing, I guess.
And this is like a section of the installation.
Yeah, that's a section of a detail that was at an old friend. A woman, Haley, had a gallery up the street called the Stairwell Gallery. It's started in a little house, actually, in her stairwell, and then she found the space that I think is now, Dave has a record store there still, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, Analog Underground. But that was an art gallery that many of the artists here in Providence showed work at for a few years. So she had a good run there, and that's a detail. The top corner, I think there's a piece, an image of the full piece there, and I got together with another artist who now lives in France, Baptiste Ibar, and I kind of painted that together. We did a cool performance with a Cuban drummer, Evans Molina Fernandez, who's also a visual artist here in Providence. And we kind of did some trippy dance and music performance with congas and an oboe, and passed out masks to everybody who attended.
Is that something that you've done more after this, where you would create an installation and then perform with it, or as,
No.
as a part of the environment?
Not not methodically, but it can happen,
It
and
has
it
happened.
will happen again.
Oh, yeah. And here's another detail of a relief piece.
That's basically a giant screen print that was put together in ASU 20 Gallery, and
Fuego, fire.
yeah, that I was thinking about the end of the world and natural disaster, and
As we do.
you know,
Well, no, connecting it to the previous image, right, of flooding, and now we have fires. I mean, these are things that have been affecting
all of us.
all of us very recently. Not that it's not been a recent thing, but it's more continuously happening, right? It's like it always has, but not like how it's had.
Right now, we get the information much faster, and we know about it all.
We hear that more of them are happening one after the other.
Correct. Yeah.
And then this piece here, and we'll show a few more.
Yeah. That's called They All Speak Hip Hop, and I can't remember exactly when I made that, to be honest, but this beat is banging.
I can't believe he's doing the Running Man. So I know.
Yeah.
I wish I could move like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was a voice for the wallflowers. That I noticed is in the printing room there, the Dirt Palace, which I printed that here actually. And that was at a turbulent time in our government's history.
I know, we thought it would have been worse than that.
I know, we really did.
We really did, and it was like, can I get
I know, that makes that fella look pretty good right now.
Yes.
I think that
That is, I think, mineral water song.
Right? That was jealous.
And that is, another kind of inspired by and ode to, nature and the mystery and phenomena of the natural world.
But that's been the recurring, right? It's
Very
usually
recurring,
like
yeah. It's
landscape,
definitely one of my
nature.
greatest sources of inspiration. Yeah, that's a painting. It's pretty large. That's an old piece from long ago.
Where is it now?
And it's sold to someone, I'm not sure who. I don't even remember what I called that piece. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I feel like sometimes we make work and then it's like, where is it? And like
Yeah.
trying to figure out, who did I give it to?
There's a lot that I should have recorded and documented that I did not, and that's definitely somewhere.
Just because of time, I'm gonna go through some of these.
Mm-hmm.
Just really stunning collages and composites.
Mostly water-based mediums on panel or paper. There's some canvas in there. It's like a walk down memory lane over here.
And I can get that one. We'll talk about this one.
Where was that? I did that in Providence here. There's some glitter on there. I think I might have touched that glitter on there after seeing some of Pippi's prints. I think that was I can't remember, something for King Abu. And I was just, at the time, just trying to reuse a lot of paper that I printed, and there's some screen printed elements in the back there. And I was also really inspired by Africa and my own cultural heritage and connection to the continent of Africa and specifically West Africa. So I was kind of doing a little reconnecting there. And the same as this piece, they made them right around the same time. This I painted in my apartment in Brooklyn after watching a fella on the corner. He was clearly selling weed bags, but the cops were scoping him out, and I heard this woman tell him not to worry. They're not worried about us, baby. So that's kind of like a little comic frame I painted shortly after. A lot of like in the moment occurrences that inspire.
Like reaction to
Yeah.
your events and
It could be like, a national event, global event, or something that just happened on the corner.
right from something that's like surrounding you either personally but also socially.
Correct.
I know you had put aside some of your graphic work.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah.
And then, I just think it'd be really interesting to see some of Andrew's commercial work, right? And after seeing some of his fine artwork, and then I would like to talk about the window and also open it up to you guys in terms of conversation.
Okay. This is, I was just talking to Anna about this. Can this go back? How's that work? Oh, there you go. Yeah, down. So this is for an album that I produced that's set to come out next year. She mentioned it briefly. And this was fun because I was able to work with the label. It's a French label that's putting out the album, but I kind of had the concept for the design, had the photo taken of this artist who, Jadon is his name, and then sent my rough sketch, which is what this is, to the designer in France, and he and I went back and forth to create the layout, and then the final cover was this one. So, which is just, I'm usually on the other end of that, receiving information of direction to get the final result, where it was fun for me to delegate. That is dub album, that's what we were listening to when we just came in. Produced the music with a production team I've been working with for about 10, 15 years, and just put that kind of futuristic, ancient imagery together.
Would you think it's like Afrofuturist?
Yes, yeah, that's the term they're using these days.
You think so? But,
Yeah.
you could use it whenever.
Yeah.
I think for this case, it made me think
It's-
of that.
It's fitting, yeah.
Um,
That's the whole layout, just to kind of
It doesn't
give
hurt.
a scoop.
no, but just seeing how you're working with color and collage and also the layering of the images and how, we just saw in your fine artwork.
That was the first single from that project, and that the woman featured in that image, you can see here, she's showed up in the back in the center panel. But this is a good friend of mine, Michelle Subtly is her name.
Mikhail
Correct.
is right here, right now, in this town.
Yeah.
Beautiful woman.
That's that's a single release. That was an independent release on my independent record label with the same artist, Jadon, and it featured another artist, Ake Beka is his moniker, and I painted the image on paper, just acrylic, and then, added the font in Photoshop. That's a show poster. I just threw that in there because I knew Ty was going to be here.
Go Ty, go Ty, go Moon, go Ty, go Moon City.
That's an album cover that came out 2 years ago. That is featuring a painting from a good friend who I mentioned before, Baptiste Ibar, and just did the kind of layout design work for the cover. They do these rhythms where it's one composition of music, like one track, and then they have 10 artists sing on the same track, and the DJs play the track for like 20 minutes in the club, and they're really quick released, and that was the last two images were for these rhythm releases. That was a fun one to do. That was an idea that the producer had for the album, and he was describing to me this book with the photos falling out, and then an old Rasta man holding the book, and all this. He described all these elements, and it was fun to work on it with him because I actually had him go take the photo of most of the people in there who he was close to and send it to me, and then we developed it together. So he was super psyched the way the final image came together. Real simple, basic. Yeah, that is another Boo City single release, and that actually, my daughter drew that after asking her to do something that looked like Jonathan Weishart's tattoos. Simple. The name of the rhythm kind of dictated the direction of that. That was a real recent album design cover for an artist, a Jamaican artist in Boston, and I was like struggling with it because he had this real clear vision of the name of the album is Reflection, and he had this real clear vision. I just couldn't quite achieve what he was going after, and then finally hit it. And by doing this weird reflection technique I learned off of YouTube, which was like nothing I thought that I was gonna do, but he ended up being happy with it. So that's another one of the rhythm releases.
They're so different, right? In terms of, the simple photos to like super heavily collaged, or some have drawing in them, or...
Yeah, some of them are super labor intensive, and some of them I can make in 20 minutes, but it's always the same pay.
Also, in this graphic work you're using more like straight up photography, right?
Photography,
Paintings
textures,
and
a lot of
collages.
Adobe stuff. Yeah, totally. And these are just some older show posters for stuff around town here.
And this person with the guitar, no? That's
Yeah,
a recurring
that was a
imagery?
recurring. Yeah, I think that only happened there, and that painting that you saw, but I did take the image from the painting and kind of put it together.
But just that symbol of like the guitar being this object that changed a lot of your musical endeavor, right? From cello to guitar.
Yeah, and the guitar is like my go-to. It's what I write most of songs with and kind of start tracks with.
Oh. Okay, so.
Dantana.
So now that we have a really nice, even though a lot of you are familiar with Andrew, I just thought it would be really good to have a really nice visual representation of some of your graphic work. We have a little bit about the music. But if we can now dive into the garden project or the window that you made, and I'll pull up those images again. But yeah, if you can just kind of begin with like what was the process like in terms of the inspiration of working based on the Woonasquatucket River, and not only also knowing the series that's happening here, but kind of revisiting Providence, right? Which was a big important part of your development.
Yeah, I guess this came together pretty. It's like I mulled over it for a long time in my mind, thinking of what am I gonna do? And you could go so over the top. In my mind, I had like a more social commentary angle on police brutality. If I ever wanted to do something in the Oneyville Square window, that was like my original thought. But using like mannequins and uniforms and like fake blood and pistols, and like I was gonna go like all out, but then I read the fine print that this is funded by the Woonasquatucket watershed, and I just went a totally different direction and was thinking like about time and budget and all these things, and also the river, and in my own life and staring out at like where I live now is super serene and remote in the woods, and it's a part of my daily practice is spending time outside and preparing for the seasons. I have, where I live, I burn wood, so I have a really close relationship that's developed with the forest around me, and harvesting trees and cutting them up and keeping the house warm.
Opposite of Brooklyn and Providence.
Yeah, and but then also I've also had like an older relationship with this river too, and it inspired some of the work I did when I was in college, and it was kind of cool to revisit it and think about being here and walking along this river so many nights. I had a studio right along the river on the opposite side of where Price Right is now for a long time. And then I just started to kind of think about the river and water supplying this community, water supplying ourselves, and I really got kind of romantic about it and wanted to, somehow make it mysterious and beautiful and highlight it. And then it started, being so active in my own environment with trees and with plants, growing food, and it just kind of inspired me to appreciate that on a magnified level. And I was happy to kind of like look at that through a microscope and in my mind blow it up into a larger scene that other people could take it.
And you talk a little bit about in the description about the color blue and this idea of nocturnalness, or the idea of the river kind of not being noticed or forgotten. Can you talk a little bit more about the use of light and shadow and blue, and just how that kind of informed the piece?
Sure, yeah. I mean, immediately we all, like, when we're kids, we painted the ocean blue, right? So it was kind of wanting to show the water intake flowing through the tree structure, and
almost like if the forest or part of it is submerged.
Or even if we could, as if we were watching the tree actually draw the water from the river with it. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what was going on in my mind in the color. And I also brought in gold and the black background to kind of, to brighten up the color, because I felt like it would obviously pop better.
I also think though the simplicity of it and keeping this like kind of very clean kind of surface of where the trees are coming from almost transcends the idea of the way you've created these landscapes also in your paintings or like 2D work.
It's like a manifested 3D from a flat space. And I wanted there to, I'm glad it came out, I'm glad it worked, to be honest with you. Because structurally I wasn't quite sure how to execute it, but I wanted it to stay minimal. And we're just kind of looking at it for de-install, and the reality is there's maybe 8 of those trees that are mounted from the bottom, but the rest of them are just kind of draped in there. And there's a few strings holding them to the top, but I love those things. I mean, I'm sure we all do, in experiencing visual art where there is this mystery of like how is that functioning, or how is that even working? So there's a little magic in it.
And the lighting, I mean, to me, the lighting is almost everything, the shadows that are happening.
That
How did that come?
was because once it was installed, Pippi flipped the light switch.
It was gonna be sick.
I don't think you added another light, did you? No, yeah, I didn't. I meant, we talked about it a bit, and I was like, maybe I was gonna maybe put a fan in there to like have some flutter, and then maybe mount some other lighting, but ultimately it just worked. Just to be totally transparent.
We have about 15, 16 minutes. I do want to hear from you guys that are here. If you have any comments or questions for.
We do have a microphone.
Yeah,
For
we're videotaping everything, so anyone has
An audio recording.
yeah, so.
So yeah, any comments or questions? S'il vous plaît, por favor.
S'il te plaît.
I just want to thank you for having this installation because, knowing you when I met you.
Is her mic on?
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe we're not doing it right, but when I met you, going on 20 years ago or something, I knew you as a sculptor.
That's right.
One of the first pieces I ever saw you do was, it was very heavy for me. I never forget it. It was like on this tiny boat, and there were people in tin cans. I was like, oh my god, So the first time I saw this, I was driving down the road. I thought, wow, that's really pretty. Immediately it just struck me as gorgeous. It was beautiful. And I thought, what the fuck, Andrew? You got a whole fucking window. You don't talk about my people. I had no idea what the project was about. So it was really awesome to hear today that this is for the river. And so it makes 100% sense. Like, blue in the. I love it so much because I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking at. And now that I know that, I feel extra excited because there's nothing more universal than living on this earth. And so I'm very proud of you. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's very nice to see you, Pippi. I'm so glad you're here doing it.
Does anyone else?
Preguntas?
You talked about one particular painting that was a challenge to actually complete, and that it was a pain in the ass and you didn't enjoy that process. And that music at that time was kind of how you pulled out of that. Can you talk about how everything kind of came back together, where you were able to sort of reconcile both artistic disciplines in your life and what made that work for you?
I guess it was just time. I got pretty after that show. I stayed visually active, like drawing, and I'm constantly doing kind of design work. But it's kind of all in this. It's in the computer. You're looking at the screen all day. But it was really just time for me and it used to swing back and forth really quickly or be happening at the same time. Like, you have a practice, you make a song, and go print to print, and then that started to spread out to where I'd separated. I'd have like, a week of being completely visual and not touching any music, and then that would turn into months of just making visual work and not making any music, and then, or vice versa, and in that era where I was struggling with that, making that piece, and it was a whole body of work. I did a whole solo show and filled the gallery and felt great about it. It all looked like good. I don't mean to be like, it was awesome, you should have seen it, but I felt good about it, and it was like right at the time where like nothing was, I don't think I sold one thing, and it of course hurt my ego, and then I just I got a call to go work on a record, and then it just kind of kept me there. And then honestly, it was money. It was being able to pay the bills and feed my kid. And I just said to myself, I'm gonna stay focused on where this is taking me and follow this road. And then it was just time before it swayed back to making visual work, which was really weird because I always was making visual art, always, since a little boy. And to take that long a break off was foreign to me, but it totally made sense, and now I'm happy to be doing it again.
Any more comments or questions?
Do you want to comment on the little sticks that are in the parking lot?
Are they still there?
I don't know.
I think those were from your piece. But I painted them. It was a collaboration. You didn't even know it was happening.
That's right.
That's it.
Okay, yeah. To riff on Deb's comment too, we talked a little bit about the balance in between visual art and music, and Andrew's career has been making me think a lot of this Puerto Rican artist that I worked with, curator, musician, Beto Moon. And we talked about how, and I wondered for you, of like when you play music or you perform, how there's a more immediate kind of, not reward, but satisfaction, no? Or kind of the way you experience it after the story that you said. You're making all this work, you do this huge solo show, and then all of a sudden it's like
there is a thing about
immediacy of like performance.
And not only immediacy, accessibility, which also gave me kind of a distaste from like visual art for a while, is showing in the gallery, working hard to be in a Basel, or working hard to be in some pop-up or museum or whatever, and the amount of accessibility, where the amount of education that's involved to know to go to that museum to see work, where on the street music is blasting in out of car stereos and we're experiencing it on a daily basis, and even just the cost of music to be able to experience it
And to share it.
And all of that was a huge kind of impetus and swaying towards the music side, because it's just it's immediate in that way as well.
And just to wrap up, we have about 10 minutes. Can you talk about your latest project, both musically and also visual art? But I know musically you have something that's coming out soon that's more personal.
Yeah, I'm working on a solo album of some kind of it's kind of folk. It's songwriting. It's very personal stuff I've written over the years. Where I've been working on it for a long time, but I get wrapped up in a band, or I get wrapped up in producing for another artist, or I'm writing songs for other artists, which I've done a lot of. And this is this stuff that's like, the most like personal, real stuff about experiences, or relationships, or depression, or addiction, or loss of friends and family. So,
La vida.
yeah, la vida.
La vida.
Simplemente.
And we're gonna listen to maybe some of that, but definitely some of the music that Andrew's worked on. And taking this to really thank you for showing here, and also please take the time to talk to us one-on-one. Andrew's gonna still be here for a few more minutes, and we're gonna be listening. Oh, in the back.
I just want to ask one more question. For me, like this project really helps me, understand the level of beauty that the Woonasquatucket can have. And I just want to
Oh,
know
that's great.
what I can do to facilitate that properly and further. What is happening at the Dirt Palace that I can see these blue trees because the water is so clean. I want to know that.
Maybe that is a question Pippi or Xander can answer. What is the end goal of the watershed waterway?
I mean, it seems like you've been invited to, so I can be more aware of this, and so now I am. So now, what do I do? What do I let them know?
Yeah. So part of the project is not just to talk about the way the river needs to be cleaned, but also how much work has gone into cleaning up the river. And that's been kind of an interesting thing is in curating this, I think a lot of artists have been kind of working with trash or working with found objects or talking about how much further there is to go. And the Greenway's like, look at how much we've done.
Yeah, okay.
But also to kind of announce that there's going to be more programming, and I think part of like the idea behind it is that by bringing more people into like spending time along the river or thinking about the river, that in itself will create more impetus
100%.
to kind of like.
So like where do we? If I wanted to go sit with my children by the water, where would you suggest that we go do that? And then let's protect it right now.
Yeah.
Is that happening? Is there like a new?
That's how you
Bike
give a
path.
shit about what
Yeah.
you're doing. You have to go
So
do it.
Riverside Park is like they actually I was walking along there just yesterday and they got some new benches that are made out of logs over there, and it's a really dreamy place. I think I saw this little rabbit that was like really eager to just hang out. Like it's a really
Where
nice.
is that?
It's right kind of behind Atlantic Mills. You go back.
Oh
there.
in the park.
Yeah, and
Okay, so
it's
that
like
that place looks wonderful.
it's really like getting busy, and you know it's like
We
just
have a great time over there.
yeah. So I think
like what else. I mean, I think what you're saying is I can just show up, and that's.
yeah, and then so as kind of end of this, so we're I think the only organization that's been doing programming all throughout the year, and most of what this project is, like the other groups that are doing stuff, will be doing a culminating piece in July. What's the date? So
I can't remember if it's the 27th or 29th. It's whichever one is like the obvious weekend.
and there's going to be a big tent in Danigian Park where there'll be like 3 days of programming to kind of like that will involve a lot of different like neighborhood stuff and talking about the history of the neighborhood and ways to kind of like just spend time with other people from the neighborhood, talking about the river and all that stuff.
There's also the paddles, right?
Oh yeah.
Also, Alexander, who is the next artist and exhibiting?
Eli Nixon?
Eli Nixon. Okay, when does that open? June?
June.
Something? June 4th. Okay. Cool. Any more questions or comments from the audience? Andrew, you want to do final words?
Just thanks for coming, and thank you to the Dirt Palace, my old friends, for having me. I appreciate it.
Gracias. There's some snacks in the back. Please enjoy and also enjoy the music that we're